Hello, everyone. This is Greg Aden with Aden Leadership and another episode of Servant Leaders Podcast. And today I have the pleasure of interviewing what I consider a dear friend. I've known Ed since 2014 or 15. I don't remember exactly. But Ed is currently the office lead partner at Singer Lewack. He has been with that firm for a while, and he's going to tell us a little bit about his journey here in a second. But let's first bring him in. Ed, how are you today?
Doing great, thanks.
Great to see you. You are probably one of the funniest guys I've met from Strategic Connections. You have a dry sense of humor. You come across as very, very knowledgeable, but you have a humble servant heart. Have you ever been told that before?
Yeah, by you.
Okay, other than your servant
Yes.
leader. Okay,
Yes.
good. I mean, when you hear that though, humble servant heart, what does that mean?
So, as you know, I sit on the board of the Colorado Thought Leaders Forum,
Yeah.
and one of the leading attributes and characteristics of the organization is heart level leadership. HEART being an acronym for humble, engaged, authentic, regenerative, and the T is taking that outward with service. And so, for me, that's in part how I try to live my life in any encounter, this or otherwise, to
Sure.
leave others better off than they were before we got together.
When did you first determine, CTLF or otherwise, when did you first feel Ed Schenkein becoming a heart level leader or someone who's leading from the heart and not from the head? Do you remember a time in your life when that change occurred?
Earlier in my life and in my career, certainly there was, I always kind of ran toward leadership opportunities, and when there were leadership voids, would step in. And that was at that point, based on, kind of like my EQ and outward, growth and intelligence. It took a while before I realized that there's too much ego in that and not enough heart. And I think
Amen.
heart came into it, in my late 20s, and has just been, I've been trying to tap that and grow upon that ever since. And so how does it land for me? Not intellectually or having the next best answer,
Mm-hmm.
but how does it feel? What am I sensing? What am I connecting with you or someone else, and taking it forward? And that comes from within, not from
Yeah.
the head.
Yeah, beautiful. I'm always curious when I interview someone who has a successful past. You've been very consistent with your job of choice around accounting, et cetera. But I'm curious, Ed, who are some of the people that you can give credit to over the years, going back to your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s? I think you're still in your young 50s or late 40s. I don't remember. It doesn't matter. Give us a few of those mentors or those coaches, if you will, that have been in your life.
Yeah. So when I was in high school, my mom went back to school and went to DU for law school. And so while I was in high school, she's in law school. It showed me that you can do anything as long as you set your mind to it. And at that point, I thought I was going to do something law, business, transactional work, kind of as a combination. Being a good Jewish mother, she said, there's always room for another good lawyer. So that would be you. But then I figured out that I didn't know any happy young lawyers. And so then I said I was going to be happy. So I could use the tools and understanding that I gained from studying parts of law without going to law school and becoming a lawyer. When I started in public accounting, two of the partners, kind of took me under their wing, and in their own separate ways of doing it, basically said, you don't have to know everything. You just have to know where you can find resource.
Beautiful.
And you don't have to be the center You just need to trust that you have resources around you.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, the amount of work that you do, you're going to get your work done because you're a driven human being. But your responsibilities are really to take care of yourself, take care of your family and your community. Work will fill in all the gaps. So don't worry about doing enough work. Take care of you and your family and your community, and you will be fine. That was probably the greatest gift of mentorship that I received, in my mid
Early on.
20s.
Yeah.
And then, one of those gentlemen became my partner, or I became his partner, I guess I should say is the correct way, in Stark Schenkein, which, we then merged into Singer Lewack around the time that you and I met back in 2015.
Yeah. Who can we give this gentleman a name?
Yeah, it's Wes Stark.
Wes Stark. Okay. Terrific. I always like to hear the name. And if is Wes still with us? Is he still okay.
Wes is retired. He's still here in Denver.
Terrific.
And I'll give you another piece of Wesley is he was never afraid to say just it's okay to leave a little on the table as long as you're doing the right thing. And you'll do a lot better treating people with honey than with vinegar.
Beautiful.
And so that kindness that and whatever was within me, and it was always good to have reminders like that.
Leave a little on the table. It's my background as a franchise sales guy and development, blah blah blah, for years, and a lot of selling, a lot of negotiating, going back and forth, and that's a really wise statement for people in sales and development. And you don't want to take everything, and I love that. Leave a little on the table. I'm gonna give that.
You don't have to overextend.
Yeah.
Giving, and you don't have and we shouldn't be extractive anyway.
Exactly.
Because if we're doing this together, it's of mutuality, and it requires something from both of us to do that and go forward together.
Beautiful. Well, Wesley, as you listen to this, thank you for your kind and wise words to Ed way back when. So more recently, in the last 2-3 years, when you kind of look up in the sky or feel it in your heart, who has been an important person, a human being in your life, Ed, and has helped you continue to shift?
I would say a mutual friend of ours, Doug McGee.
Mm-hmm.
Doug, with his manner of coaching and looking at growth and deeper human experience, has really helped me be more vulnerable and be more comfortable with myself, and using those elements in stretching and growing and leading.
Yeah. Doug's a man amongst men. And when he decided he's always been a great coach, and he had a very successful career in mortgage banking, et cetera, but he really found a beautiful niche. And I've heard other men who have worked with Doug say similar things around how he's helped them really see the inner strength that we have and stop getting, I believe he says, get out of your ego and into your heart more like you are already, but really owning who you are and not fearing what you can't be, but owning who you want to be. And Doug's got a beautiful way of working with people. So Doug, if you're listening out there, I know you will be. Thank you. He's been a dear friend of mine since the mid 80s and went to school with his older brother, Stephen, and kind of where all this started, frankly. And without Doug, I wouldn't have met Bob Newman. If I wouldn't have met Bob Newman, I wouldn't have been introduced to Strategic Connection. So Bob Newman, if you're listening, thank you, brother. Appreciate you very much. Anyone else you want to recognize that has been important in your journey, Mr. Schenkein?
Yeah, if it wasn't for Bob Newman, we wouldn't be together.
That's true.
We wouldn't have been in Strategic Connections together.
Yeah, that's true. Again, Thank you, Bob.
Yeah.
There's another man. You talk about a successful career and then saying, I want to be more. I want to be more in touch with what I can offer this world. And boy, he's done some incredible stuff too.
Yeah, I will say that there was a moment 5.5 years ago. Bob was new into his coaching work
Yeah.
and had left uh, his business to start his coaching work. And we had breakfast one morning, and it was right at the moment when Judy and I were looking at bringing in our foster dog.
Mm.
And I started to tell Bob about that. And then he took an extra hour with me that morning and helped me process it all. And, it was just a gift of Bob Newman,
Yeah.
and so, you get little snippets along the way that aren't necessarily the huge pivotal thrusts of, you know, heart level leadership or generous spirits. And it's like, by mentioning Bob's name, that reminded me of that moment. So thank you.
Yeah, he's a good man, and he's done great things. And he again has a genuine way of helping human beings get to where they want to go. So I like to play pretend every once in a while. Although I just turned 60, I still think I'm a kid at heart, and I like to pretend. I love the question why, but I want you to pretend with me for a second, Ed. And if you had 150 young men and women coming out of school, lawyers, accountants, coaches, whatever, what would you tell them? What would you say to them about how to prepare for the next 8 to 10 years in their life? And it can involve leadership, it can involve money, relationships, but what nugget of advice would you give these young human beings getting ready to step foot into the real world, so to speak?
Great question. So since you and I are, less than a year apart anyway,
I'm
I think
older,
it is
right?
yes, I don't turn 60 till July. I always tell people, look, I'm immature for my age. That's
Yeah.
why you can't tell how old I am. But
Beautiful.
I think that there is an aspect of retaining childlike qualities that help keep people young. If you're not curious, playful, to your point, you know, you know, where do you find happiness and joy? Going back to the, you know, emerging leaders, I think the thing that I have really learned over time was that trusting yourself, quieting that ego, um, being self aware and doing your work, everything else comes out of that. You don't have to be the smartest one. You don't have to have the best widget. You just have to believe in yourself and be generous with others and be respectful and kind, and everything else flows.
It's funny, and I'm just going to repeat back some of what you said. Be curious, be playful, have happiness and joy in your heart. Trust yourself. I love that because we are raised by typically two parents, sometimes four in my case, sometimes one, right? Things happen. But you also said believe in yourself. And you also said one of my favorite words or phrases is self-awareness. And I believe every day, Ed, we get to look in the mirror, the proverbial mirror, the real mirror, and ask ourselves, Ed or Greg in this case, who do you want to be today? How do you want to show up in the world today? And another dear friend of both of ours, Anson Thompson, who's also going to be speaking on February 9th, is actually reaching out to his community about what his next book should be like, with the kind of the thought of from victim to victory. And I was talking about that with my loving spouse Tammy this morning, and I believe it comes down to just a big collection of choices and decisions, because every day, every moment, right now, you and I get to decide: are we going to be assholes? Are we going to be kind? Are we going to be curious, playful, serious, hateful, etc.? And we get to choose. And I believe as we get older, we get to we see the value in making those decisions and choices, then are kind and are curious and are playful and are helpful, instead of those choices of dog eat dog, ego, right, arrogance, narcissism, all those beautiful words that a lot of leaders think then are critical to them being important to others. But Love that. And I think you should, I believe you should write something about what our emerging leaders should do. Ed, you have a following you probably aren't aware of that is larger than life.
Mm.
And you are, again, you've got a huge heart and so much to give the world. And you might consider just writing an article for us on what emerging leaders should be focused on when they get out of school, so to speak, because they are going to be running our country, running our countries before we know it. And you and I are going to be sitting back going, wow, I'm glad they made those decisions. Because we're going to be looking at 30 somethings here as
Yeah.
more important than ever. But
And while your kids are, 10 years younger than mine,
yeah,
you know, I trust that generation, and that there is a leveling of the playing field that is more distinct at that level than it is at our level today. I think that there's always going to be some form of bias and discrimination and privilege or challenge or however you want to look at it in the world. But I think that it's, you know, my kids, are way more gender blind, color blind, socioeconomically blind than, than I was, or, we were per se growing up. And that there's a lot of challenges out there in the world. There's a lot of voids and needs for, you know, succession of and growth in leadership throughout.
amen.
And I believe in that generation,
Well,
and so, you know, I, you know, I trust that, they are looking at things like that. My wife sees it, and Judy sees it in her pediatrics practice, in terms of young parents are taking on parenthood and life in a different way
thank
than
God.
20 years ago when she was meeting with families. And
That's
that
good to
isn't
hear.
a diss against that older, it's just the evolution,
Yeah.
right?
Well, you mentioned one of my favorite words, leadership, and as you know, I've dedicated a big chunk of my time and my investment into leadership development series. And whether we reach 125 or 50,000 people, the goal is to bring great minds, big hearts to the table and to the stage, so to speak. And I believe that I've recognized over my years, collaboration has been something that I truly have a lot of joy in. But when I asked you if you wanted to participate, and were kind enough to participate in the first one, February of 21, and thank you for that, Ed. But what were some of the reasons you wanted to take the stage, share with others? In this case, hopefully you'll be able to have a conversation with Lisa Pedersen and Greg Greenwood, who a lot of people know as well, and have a conversation. What are the reasons you wanted to be involved in this?
Um, in that first one, it was a growth point. It was kind of a courageous challenge to myself in terms of going out on stage and using my voice. And I worked really hard on that thing. I got, I did some, I got some coaching on it. I did, I went out to people and did some inquiries about, how do you see me? What do you appreciate? How could I engage? How do I take this element that's important to me and bring that to an audience? And I really played with it, very deliberately. And I learned a tremendous amount from that whole thing.
Good.
And, one of the greatest gifts of that day, because we were virtual, right,
Yeah.
was that the only people in the room were either the speakers or the crew that was supporting putting the production on.
Great.
And so the intimacy and level of engagement was different than if we were in a full ballroom, right?
Yeah.
And so it was a really cool experience that I'll never forget.
Wow, that's awesome.
One thing that I'm fortunate is that over the past 8 years, via Leslie Jones, the co-founder of Spiral Method.
Yeah.
I've been a participant with her in Spiral Method, and I recently took the Spiral Method facilitation course from her.
Beautiful.
And it was, what I learned was how stingy I was with using it, because I deployed it. I only thought about Spiral Method in the group I was with her once a month.
Oh,
But in playing with it from the facilitation perspective, it's like that piece about leadership I just spoke about. It's applicable everywhere.
yeah.
So it really, it was like, I didn't know I was being stingy, and look at this access I have in me already
Yep.
that I have this capacity I'm not using. Why don't I use this?
Leslie's
So awesome.
Yeah, Leslie's a master. I had a chance to, just at the CTLF holiday event the other night, David Bizarro and myself and Leslie and my wife Tammy were sitting at the table, and she said, "Let's have some fun with these questions." And we're 2 drinks into the night, and God, it was fun. I mean, honestly, and you're sitting right next to your spouse, and Leslie, as you know, is a powerful human being. David has a wonderful relationship, and he came from a whole different place, but just in that 15, 20 minutes, we discovered a lot. Right. And you can, when you're asking, like you said earlier, it's the power of inquiry, and you're curious, but intentionally. And then you answer in brief instead of explaining yourself. Just say what's in your heart. Yeah, Leslie does a great job, and looking forward to that. Ed, any final parting words you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, on that point, the one word, the one phrase, the one sentence, the 3 sentences. I'm a man of context. I love to give context to what I'm talking about, because I'm trying to ensure that I'm understood.
Mm-hmm.
And the power, like what you said, in the quick nugget is just huge. And so it's always a great takeaway to decide, how am I going to show up in this, and what can I get from it?
Yeah.
What can I give to it?
Well, I can say anyone listening to this can feel, can hear, can tell that you, Ed Schenkein, are a kind man. You're curious. Thank you. I honestly thank you for being playful. Thank you for being a child at heart. And you said immature, and I know that might be taken out of context, but we are, but in a playful way. We are, but in an appropriate way. And there's nothing wrong with that. Adults, human beings listening, be more playful, and let yourself go. Let your little kid come out. And again, I want to mention what Wes said. Leave a little on the table.
Yep.
When you're having one of those difficult conversations, don't be a taker. Don't be an overgiver, as you said. And I think that's important to remember too, Ed. You made it very clear. Don't give everything away, but you're not there to extract either. So let's leave the extraction to the professionals that they are, the dentist. But I also want to just say thank you, Ed. I mean, I just love that smile. Love the little kid inside you. Ed Schenkein with Singer Lee Wack. Thank you so much. Give someone a hug. And
sounds good, Greg. Thanks so much.
I appreciate you very much. So remember, God bless everyone. Be curious, be playful, have happiness and joy in your heart, and say hello to someone you haven't said in a while. And maybe write something down and send it to somebody and let them know you're thinking about them. Talk to you soon.